Welcome to USMNT Weekly on the Total Soccer Show, your one-stop shop for everything men's national team. And what a time to be with us in the September international break with home games against Korea and Japan coming up. On this episode, we're looking at how the roster's shaping up for those games, what to expect from the opponents, and what we're hoping to see from these tune-up games in general. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, hello, Taylor Rockwell. How are you?
I am nervous, Ryan Bailey. It's friendlies. They don't really matter, but the World Cup is not far away. We have concerns about the squad. It is an unserious squad, I believe one of my co-hosts referred to it as, and we are playing two very serious opponents. It's going to be interesting.
Don't be nervous, Taylor. It'll all be over soon.
Talking about life? You talking about these games? I'm not really sure which one.
You interpret that how you will.
All right.
Very good. Joining us to discuss these games and much more, Joe Larry. Hello, how are you?
Hey, it's me, Mr. Unserious himself. The good news is the roster got a little more serious when that mystery box player was revealed to be Folarin Balogun. It kind of sounded like Pochettino was going to give the first call to Brian White, and then Brian White got
Same
hurt.
player.
And he
Let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about that bit, Joe.
He turned to the better player second. Things are great. Things are good. I'm very much excited for these games. We will see a more complete picture of the U.S. men's national team than we did over the summer. That is progress, even if I have still not gotten over some of Pochettino's picks for this roster. We did all that last week, so I'm not going to rant about it again.
Very good, Joe. I did miss the Balogun reveal. I assume it was a giant box of question marks on it, and he burst out of it. Was that how it was done?
Well, it was Mario themed. Mauricio Mario, close enough, I guess. And so they had one of those big yellow boxes like in Super Mario Bros. And they just had Poch as soon as he was done with Big Noon college kickoff on Fox. He just sprinted off and found that box, jumped up, like head bopped it from below, and then Folarin Balogun like popped out. You know, not very excitedly. I'll add Balogun, but I guess it's kind of cramped in that box. I'm not really sure.
There we go. Joining us also, our resident Big Noon college kickoff fan, Graham Ruthven. Hello, Graham. How are you?
I'm very well. Ryan Bailey, I was concerned that this was an unserious camp until I saw Poch on Big Noon kickoff with the pizza review guy from YouTube. That made me feel much better that he's taking this very seriously.
I missed this as well. Poch was holding up a sign behind the guys, I take it, saying, like, I'm revealing Flo Balogun today. Was that it?
Joe saw it. You tell us, Joe.
That is exactly what happened. And I know Poch got roasted a little bit for doing that bit on ahead of the college football season and on Fox. I love that he's doing that stuff. Like, obviously, U.S. Soccer is pushing him into these kinds of situations. They want him to be a face of the team heading into the World Cup. I see very little downside to doing that and a whole lot of upside. Poch did not look very comfortable, but he's not going to look that comfortable. I think the Scuff guys were talking with Charlie Bum about how it'd be like if you ask Greg Berhalter to go down to Argentina and like cut a steak perfectly in the Argentine culturally appropriate fashion in front of a giant crowd. Like, it does not get more American than college football. Yeah, exactly. Like, you can't expect Poch to nail the subculture of college football. I like that he tried.
He looked shocked that there were fans at a game. He's not seen that before. Sorry, it's too easy.
Oh, boy. Well, he might do this coming week, Graham, with games in Harrison, New Jersey and Columbus, a slightly smaller stadia for the USMNT. So, actually, that's a question I'd like to approach, Graham. Do you feel like there's any strategy behind these stadium selections? Obviously, Columbus being a bit of a stronghold traditionally.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, I haven't given it much thought until now, but these games are obviously controlled by US Soccer rather than CONCACAF, which seemed to be part of the issue with the Gold Cup and previous games that the US have played. And so smaller venues seems to be a good idea to me, and as you say, and particularly smaller venues in like soccer strongholds like Columbus. So, yeah, I think I saw someone on social media say that Red Bull Arena's already sold out. That you couldn't. The only place to get tickets was on resale.
Sports Illustrated Arena, Graham.
Excuse me.
Sports Illustrated Stadium. Thank you very much.
Gosh. Sorry.
Yeah, if you're going to do the PR thing, Ryan, do it right. Apparently sold out. You can only get tickets on resale, so that is encouraging. There'll be more people there to see South Korea, right? Are playing at sports.
Yep.
See how good they are.
Yeah,
against the US.
Yes, South Korea playing in Harrison, New Jersey on Saturday at 5 Eastern, and of course Japan on Tuesday in Columbus at 7:30 Eastern. Joe, this is, if my math is correct, there's only 6 international breaks, including this one, until the World Cup. So we've got September, October, November, January, March, and the June one, slightly before the World Cup too. Yikes. Is that enough time? We feeling good about that?
Well, I mean, to cast our minds back to last week, that was sort of my whole thing about Pochettino's decision to not call Weston McKennie in particular into this camp, saying we already know him, we don't need to call him in. The counter to that is that you really only have 4 opportunities to bring in these guys before the team convenes ahead of the World Cup. You're right, Ryan. Your math is correct. There, you got January. You have the pre-World Cup friendly and those camps that you're going to have. But that's not going to be a chance to experiment at all. It's not going to be a chance to do anything but have the World Cup roster in to play 2 games ahead of the World Cup. So really, you have 4 chances: September, October, November, and March, to have these players in before you are locked into the World Cup. And Pochettino took that to mean, well, I want to do as much exploring into the player pool as possible and give Sean Zawatsky a call. And I would have taken that to mean, well, let's get my group together because I only have 4 chances before it's go time for the World Cup, and I want to see these guys mesh. Now, there are still plenty of first-choice guys in this roster, and a lot of what I'm looking forward to is seeing some of those players and even some new players that we haven't seen under Poch, but I've seen in the past. I'm looking forward to seeing those players convene. But yeah, the clock's ticking. Like Taylor, I think you said, these friendlies don't matter, which is true from a results standpoint, right? There's no competitive difference-making thing happening here. These games matter a lot, I think, for the U.S., and all of the subsequent friendlies that the U.S. will have between now and the World Cup will also matter a lot because the time is just that short.
Yeah, very good. All right, Taylor, can we learn a bit about South Korea and Japan for a few minutes, if you will? Now, I'm seeing by the FIFA rankings that the US are 15th, Japan is 17th, Korea are 23rd, hence, ergo, therefore, nothing to worry about, right?
Yeah, that's why you shouldn't look at the FIFA rankings.
Yeah.
Yellow, baby. That's the way to go.
Give me those rankings again.
US, I believe, 15th, Japan 17th, Korea 23rd.
I mean, Japan is probably better than Korea, so they're right in that regard. I think both of these teams might be better than the United States, at least the current iteration of the United States. Japan, certainly so. From watching them in World Cup qualifying, man, are they good. Hajime Moriyasu is their manager still. He was there at the last World Cup. He is still there. He is the first Japan manager to manage them at 2 consecutive World Cups. And it hasn't really been any threat of the second cycle from what I've seen. It is not the kind of same old guys doing the same old stuff. They have evolved their tactics. They are a very exciting, aggressive attacking team. They will press high and be very aggressive in that press and try to create chaos. They will attack very aggressively, either with kind of direct balls or with a lot of like 1v1 individual dribbling and take-ons. But kind of the most frightening thing, I don't know why this concerns me so much, is how often they will try to take somebody on but then kind of cut back and recycle possession and then try it again. There's not that sort of bluntness to them. There's not that, I'll take somebody on and then just cross in, hopefully. There is a willingness to keep the ball, to recycle possession, to move it around, and then find another opportunity. And so they just end up creating lots of different looks. Shots from distance, shots in the box, like good headed chances, good 1v1 dribbles, and then a shot from that. And really, I think, again, watching them in World Cup qualifying against considerably weaker opposition than the United States, grain of salt there, they just look like they have lots of different ideas, lots of good rotations, and that was missing several like senior key players who you would assume will start in at least one or both of their upcoming friendlies against the U.S. and Mexico. So it's a really talented Japan team with a few names that people will know and then a few names that maybe people should know.
Yeah, we saw that at the last World Cup, right, Taylor, when they beat Germany and Spain in the group. Went out in the last 16, which was maybe a little bit disappointing after qualifying top of that group. And they only made the quarters of the last Asian Cup, where they were beaten by Iran, which was slightly disappointing. But there is a belief that this team can make a real impact in 2026, and that's largely due to, as you kind of referenced, Taylor, the breadth of talent that Japan currently have. I mean, they've always had a handful of stars, but this squad is now getting to the point where they have basically an exclusively like European-based squad. And I know like we've maybe fallen into the trap of being badge FC with the USMNT, so you should look a little bit beyond that. But nonetheless, you look at the players that they have, especially that midfield, where they have Taki Kubo, Wataru Endo, Ritsu Doan, who plays for Frankfurt, Daichi Kamada, who I think is often overlooked for Crystal Palace, then of course Karo Matoma, Minamino, who's at Monaco right now, former Liverpool player. So yeah, and these are all players who are included in this roster to face the US. So I think this is going to be a stiff test for the US. And they're even talking about, Japan have gone through this really interesting discourse where even though they beat Japan and Germany and Spain at the last World Cup, they did it playing largely a counter-attacking style. And because Japan has this, Taylor, we spoke about this on 101 not so long ago when we looked at the J-League. The JFA has this 2050 plan that they set out like 100 years ago or 50 years ago, and they're working towards. They want to win the World Cup by that time. And they are working through it so methodically that makes me think they will actually achieve it. I know that's very difficult to predict with World Cups and tournament football. But they are getting to the point now where, getting closer to that 2050, they want to be challenging for World Cups. And so Moriyasu, the head coach, has kind of quite fundamentally changed their style from the last World Cup, where they are much more proactive, much more on the front foot. And yes, okay, AFC qualifying probably isn't the best gauge of how close that's going to get them to a World Cup. But they seem to be on the right trajectory. And I think this could be a really a tough match for the US.
Yeah, because Graham, to the World Cup qualifying point, you're right. We both said it now. The US should beat Indonesia, for example, should beat Singapore, for example, and Japan has done both of those things. It's the speed of play that they retain, regardless of the opponent, that I think is a notable difference. I think it's a thing we've talked about at length with the US under different coaches. How often, when they're playing perceived weaker opposition, there tends to be just a lack of pace, a lack of speed, a lack of just kind of directness in the way the U.S. wants to play. They're a little bit more cautious. They're going to put the foot on the ball. They're going to move it around a little bit more. And Japan, there just seems to be much more of an emphasis on play it quickly, even if it's not fewer touches necessarily. It's just get the ball moving, keep the ball moving, don't slow it down. And because of that, they tend to create a lot of chances. They tend to score a bunch of goals. I am really interested in some of the kind of roster questions they do have. They've been starting Makino, I believe is his last name, Shuto Makino from Borussia Mönchengladbach. He's a 25-year-old striker, but they have Ueda, they have Maeda from Celtic, and Feyenoord, reverse respectively. But Makino is more of a drop-in, link-up play, overwhelm the midfield, number 9, almost like a false 9 of sorts, and has been looking pretty good in the recent matches. And if you have him in there, if you have Kubo in there, if you have Kamada in there, and I think Kubo and Kamada form a really good creative partnership in the kind of as two attacking midfielders in a 3-4-2-1, I don't know where Mitoma then goes. And he is a very talented player, an exceptional attacker. It makes me wonder if in that 3-4-1-2, if we'll see him as a left wing back almost, who then ends up just kind of posted out wide as a left winger. But if he is out there, I am very nervous because the combination of Endo, Kamada, and then whoever that left wing back is going to be, especially if it's Mitoma, there's so many good rotations and patterns that they use in creating overloads out wide to then attack centrally and kind of blitz from there. That feels like a lot of talent that the U.S. is going to have to balance, and I'm not sure they've handled that of late.
Joe, how do you feel about the US playing out from the back? We haven't really seen a full court press team against the US. If that's Riemann Richards, which, it might be Nocky Banks, but if it's Riemann Richards, how do you feel about the US's ability to do that? Because just looking at the qualifiers that Japan played earlier this year, the striker that they used, and I think 3 of those 4 games was Daisen Maeda. Daisen Maeda is a hugely flawed player, but he is a pressing machine, and so the thought of him bearing down on the US is a little bit frightful.
I actually think that the back line that Pochettino has assembled is really well suited to build from the back, assuming that we're going to see some combination of Dest, Richards, Freeman, Arfston. That feels likely. We talked about maybe Dest being on the left and Freeman being on the right. I think that's a little less likely given how much we know Poch loves Max Arfston, and that he hasn't seen Dest play for him yet and would probably want to play him at his best spot. But who am I to read into the mind of Mauricio Pochettino? I think that back 4 has a lot of potential to play out of the back. Where I think it breaks down, Graham, is in the midfield ahead of it. Right? And this would be true even if Weston McKennie was around. I'd feel a bit better about Weston McKennie and the build than I would about Sebastian Berhalter, who I think will probably eat up some of those minutes next to Tyler Adams in this window. That's a guess, but it's an educated one based off of the Gold Cup minutes. But Adams and Seb Berhalter is not a midfield that you really want to build through. And to be honest, the U.S. doesn't have that midfield in their player pool. So my answer to your question is, if it's just the back 4 in isolation, I would feel pretty good about it, but it is absolutely not that. It is also Matt Freese, so I think is mixed in this way, and it's Adams and Berhalter who are clunkier than not in those tight spots.
Just as well, Japan don't have any quality in midfield or in
right.
attacking midfield
it's all
to
good.
pick up those balls.
No problem.
What minute will the Mitoma screamer go in, is my question, I suppose, at this point.
All the minutes. 90 of them.
All right, so Graham, what's the feeling about Korea then? Are they similarly formidable at this point?
Not quite. They are the less stable of the two teams. And had this been last year, we would have been looking at a USMNT reunion with Taylor's favourite former and everyone's favourite former national team coach, because Jurgen Klinsmann was in charge of
It
this
would have been a
team for the
father-son
season.
reunion, no less.
Yeah, of course. I actually hadn't thought about that. Yeah, maybe that's why. Maybe Poch was looking at an old roster or an old fact file about this Korea team and thought Klinsmann was still the coach. Yeah, as much as Klinsmann ended up unpopular in the US, it seems like he had even fewer fans as South Korea manager, where he lasted less than a year in that job. But yeah, things have been a lot better since he was sacked. They hired Hyungmun Bo as head coach. He was South Korea's captain when they made that obviously famous run to the semi-finals of the 2002 World Cup, and he's a proper like national icon. So he's got a lot of credit in the bank. But results have certainly improved since he's come in. South Korea, they cruised through both stages of AFC qualifying. They were unbeaten over both stages. I think we might see some experimentation from them. And in fact, the reason I think that is that Hong has said they're going to experiment over the two friendly games that they've got, including the one against the US. Hong used, and they had a similar, Japan and South Korea, they had a similar sort of like Gold Cup style tournament in the summer. Where they had like a domestic-based squad for this tournament called the EAFF tournament. And basically, they used that tournament to try and come up with a plan B for the World Cup. And he said he's going to continue that into this window. So basically, in World Cup qualifying, they use, broadly speaking, they use a 4-2-3-1. It seems like they might use a back three in this game. And they are a team that have a high intensity approach, not so much in a press from the front sort of way, similar to, like, I think Japan will do more of that in their game, but they're very clever with pressing triggers in midfield. When they have the ball, they want to attack at speed, they want to get into transition as quickly as possible, and defensively they have been much more solid since they made that change from Jurgen Klinsmann. So I think we're going to see a team that largely wants to play similarly to the US, just they're better at it at the moment and have more of their key players in this squad. Taylor, you're kind of nodding, shaking your head.
I think compared to Japan, I am less concerned about Korea, but still concerned about them because I think they present a more like-for-like matchup, to your point. I think from what I saw of them, more often a like 4-2-4 defensively with a higher line of confrontation. When they're attacking, it's more of like a 2-3-5 shape. But within that 2-3-5, they have plenty of talent. There's obviously Kim Min-jae of Bayern Munich. We would assume Son Heung-min will be playing and getting some minutes. He tends to be kind of like, ends up being like in a front two for this team alongside Oh, I believe is his name, the target striker, Oh Se-hun, who plays in Japan.
Former Celtic guy.
Is he? Of course he is. Graham knows everybody who's ever been related to Celtic. Or had
he's now playing in Belgium, and he came very close to going to Stuttgart for 30 million euros on deadline day, but I think failed his medical or something. There was some sort of medical issue there. Yeah, very good run. But we should hold it up here to say different O. That would be Oh Hyung-gu, I believe. Yes.
And then Oh Se-hun. Yeah, this is easy for me to say. Is the 26-year-old player who plays in Japan. Either way, there's an O who's going to be a striker, but the one who plays in Japan is much more of a like target big guy, unless the one you're talking about, Graham, is also a target big guy. I think he's 6'2".
He's not a target big guy, but he is very physical in how he plays that. He's just a quintessential penalty box presence, is how I would describe the Celtic O.
All right, there you go. And then the Japan O is 6'4", so maybe that can tell us a little bit about what they're going to be trying to do, depending on who starts in there. A couple other like interesting names for different reasons. Lee Kang-in, we're familiar with him, 24 years old for PSG, can play out wide, oftentimes plays more centrally. And then Lee Jae-sung, 33 years old, 98 caps at present, so he could get the 100 in these two games. He's their most senior player. He plays for Mainz. He is a very important, very critical central midfielder. So if he is playing, then I think there's like some stability there. If he's not playing, then to Graham's point, it is truly an experimental team that they're trying different things. And an interesting experimentation is a potential debut for Jens Kastrup, the Gladbach central midfielder. 22 years old, he switched from German youth national teams. It was approved in August, so this is his first call-up ever at senior level. That's the first time he's eligible to be called up, and here he is. So maybe we'll get a debut for him as well.
He is the first foreign-born player to be called up to the South Korean national team, which I
did not know that.
Relatively interesting.
All right. Well, good for him. Good for Korea. Who will be strong in like a different way than Japan. I think they will be somewhat more blunt, somewhat more similar to the U.S. in terms of their speed of possession and their speed of play. But I think that presents its own level of challenges. I would expect a stronger opponent in Japan and a more threatening opponent consistently in Japan. But I think to maybe overly focus on them is to the U.S.'s detriment, because Korea are more than capable of springing some surprises.
The good news for the US is that Hwang in Biom, the Feyenoord, right, plays for Feyenoord at club level. He's out injured. He was a late call off due to, I think, a quad injury.
Yeah.
And he's usually their main man in central midfield. So and there's no Hwang Hee-chan either. So they are missing a couple of key figures that should, in theory, make things a little bit easier for the US in that central midfield.
I think so.
Unit.
The Hwang and Biom one is especially big. If you think of like Michael Bradley, that's not a great comparison, but like Michael Bradley for the U.S. when he was dropping in between the center backs to pick up the ball and sometimes
he's a deep line distributor. Yeah,
ping along. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's and is the kind of focal point in that style of play for Korea. So again, an opportunity to experiment or an opportunity to try something entirely different, but it will be to the U.S.'s advantage that he is not there for sure.
Yeah, haven't been this worried about a career since Gio Reyna's latest injury. Am I right? Bad. Anyway, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll learn a bit more about what we're watching for from the USMNT. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. Taylor, you're perhaps not the only one who's expressed some concern about the matchups for these friendlies, but that's kind of the idea, isn't it? These are teams who aren't going to blow the US out of the water, and you want a competitive game to have more learnings from these two games, right? So if there is concern, is it that the US won't be able to express itself in the final third as much?
Truly, and this is not a thing I should really be worrying about, if I'm being honest. It is more so that I think it's easy for casuals, like World Cup viewers, to come in and watch these games and be like, what? Why aren't we beating Japan? Why aren't we beating Korea? This isn't Germany. This isn't Brazil. We should be destroying these teams. And again, that's not really a thing we should concern ourselves about. But these are two good teams, and in Japan, very good, who I think will go deep at the next World Cup. And so I think to assume that they are there for the beating is a massive mistake. And so I think that's part of why I'm a little bit nervous, is just the narrative side of things. But I think to your point, Ryan, these are excellent opponents for the U.S. to have scheduled. It's great for Japan and Korea to get some more experience playing in the United States ahead of the World Cup. But for the U.S. themselves, it's great to play opponents who are going to be strong, but are not strong in the way of Germany or England or Spain, where you're going to expect to have 30% of the ball, and it's going to be about defending and how you defend and how you counter. But they're also not opposition that you would expect to have 70% of possession yourself, and how do you take this opponent apart? They are opponents who, if you meet them in the World Cup, it's either you got a rough group stage draw or maybe it's the first knockout round, but they're capable of springing surprises, and they're capable of being very difficult to break down, very difficult to attack, but also difficult to defend against. And so they give you a number of different challenges that I think you have to kind of anticipate, acknowledge, deal with, and then hopefully succeed from. So a very great challenge. I worry that the narrative already being so critical against the U.S., a failure to win both of these games gets looked upon as, oh man, we can't even beat these two teams who aren't going to do much in the World Cup. And I think that is unfair.
Yeah, it's an unfair narrative if that is the narrative that pops up, because it's an ignorant one about the quality of Japan and South Korea. Not that we shouldn't expect some level of ignorance about all this stuff, but it is a credit to U.S. soccer that they have not made decisions based off of fear of any potential narratives, right? They should not be doing that, and they haven't here. These are great friendly opponents for September. Next month, the U.S. will play Ecuador and Australia, which, given the very, very, very crowded international soccer calendar, also excellent friendly opponents for that October window. This is good work. You go through and look at the games that U.S. soccer has scheduled since the 2022 World Cup. They don't have a lot of windows to work with, right? They are working with, occasionally a fall window to get a European opponent. We saw that Germany friendly in the fall a couple years back now. They have given the U.S. opportunities to play against some very, very good teams. It's not easy stuff to do. Now, teams do want to come and play in the U.S. for a myriad of reasons. So it's not as if this is the most impossible thing in the world. But still, we spend a lot of time on this show, criticizing different decisions that get made by people around the U.S. soccer landscape. We should give credit to U.S. soccer for putting these games on the calendar, helping put them there, because these are legit games, Ryan, to your question, where you can really learn stuff, which is, again, I know I said I wasn't going to do the whole rant, and I'm not. That's why I'm frustrated that we don't see a slightly more complete U.S. squad for these games, where I would expect Poch is going to rotate a little bit from the first game to the second game. Then you're down into the depths of some backups that probably you don't need to see much of. These are great tests, and that the U.S. has an incomplete squad for these games is a bit of a frustration.
Yeah, and I like the tactical matchups or the tactical matchups we expect to see between the two games, where Japan is a little bit more like trying to imitate how you would set up against like a tier 1 team. I don't think Japan are quite there in terms of being like a tier 1 team, but they're not far off. And then South Korea, the test there is going to be, okay, if you basically hold a mirror up to yourself at a tournament, how do you handle that? Like, I expect South Korea will play a largely similar way to the US. So I like the tactical matchup. I agree these are good opponents. There's still an element of risk, though, that you end up with a Switzerland situation like before the Gold Cup. And it felt like over the summer, the US did just enough to get rid of some of the bad smell from that game. But as we get closer to the tournament, that's the gamble, is that you have a catastrophic experience like that one, and you're not able to clear some of the damage that is done. But that's the way it goes. That's the risk.
You know, Graham, I raised my hand to shoot that point down about the Switzerland thing, and then I remembered that the Japan game is second in this window, and that the Switzerland friendly was second ahead of the Gold Cup. I was thinking, this squad is stronger than the Gold Cup squad, and it is, right? This is a better group than we saw at the Gold Cup. But even still, I initially was not concerned about that, and then thinking about it now, if we see Balogun get one game instead of two, which I think feels pretty likely, and if we don't see Pulisic in both games, if we don't see Adams in both games, if Pochettino does decide to rotate, that's when we get to see the Sean Zawadzkis and Luca De La Torres and Nathan Harriels and whoever else is of this squad. That's when I start to get a little bit worried. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be fascinating to think about how Pochettino approaches this window, because he's already approached it differently than I would. And again, Pochettino will forget more about soccer than I'll ever know, right? So he's clearly thinking about different things here than I've been thinking about, or prioritizing different things than I prioritize. One of us has coached a professional soccer team and one of us has not. So I'm willing to extend some grace there, even amidst confusion. But how Pochettino approaches rotating for this window, I think is going to be really interesting to see, because there are players that I want to see, and there are players that we will see, like Balogun, like Dest. But those are two players that are coming back relatively recently from injury. And how much does he push the envelope on those guys to see them? And how much does he feel content to just see them for 30 minutes here and 30 minutes there, or a half here and 20 minutes off the bench in the second game? I don't know. I really don't know what Pochettino's approach to rotating for these games is going to be. And that has me both nervous, but also, curiously excited.
I think the Swiss game in particular, it's such an interesting one. And I guess Turkey too, but because he kind of talks about it afterwards. It's like, yeah, I wanted to give everybody an opportunity to play. Maybe that wasn't a great idea. And so, if he does rotate again, he's kind of put himself into a similar position.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't rotate, it's a problem of itself. So he's really kind of created a headache for himself, and maybe further points to the idea Joe's making of maybe you bring in all the best possible players, and then if you do rotate, there's less of a gigantic drop-off that the Swiss can exploit horrendously.
All right. So, speaking of rotation, Joe, what are we thinking about up top
Rotation
for
Joe.
this team? Rotation Joe, Larry. What are we thinking? I'm excited to see Josh Sargent get some minutes, given his pretty rampant form.
That's not where Joe's going. There's a certain player back in the squad for the first time
I
in
know.
a year, and you're asking him who
Ryan
he's
was
excited about.
Ryan was doing the thing of naming all the other options and then leaving me the one that
Continue,
I want to talk
Ryan.
about.
Sorry, I ruined your bit.
Fine. Joe, talk about Balogun.
Yeah, all right. I thought you were going to hype up Damian Downs too after you finished with Sargent.
For me, it was just Ryan trying to begin with, I'm excited to see Josh Sargent. You absolutely are not excited to see Josh Sargent, but I appreciate you being the consummate professional host that we've just stepped on. So thank you, Ryan. Joe, talk about Balogun.
Yeah, let's give Ryan some credit. I'm sure he's excited to see 12 seconds of Josh Sargent. And then
I'm
turn off the
excited,
game.
someone on LinkedIn saying they're excited to attend the conference.
That's you.
They're kind of excited.
That's your. I've seen your LinkedIn.
No, I actually think it was Ryan. I think the better example would be someone else is attending a conference and you reply so cool, excited for you.
Yeah.
Like that. That's actually what. It's not even your conference. It's your work associates conference. Yeah, Balogun, we've never seen him under Mauricio Pochettino. So that is the foundational point. That's prong one of my multi-pronged why I'm looking forward to watching Balogun in this window. Prong two is that I still think deep down that he is the best and most complete striker in the U.S. pool. Now, Ricardo Pepi is also an excellent player and a very good option up top for the U.S. I don't mind seeing Ricardo Pepi get minutes here or there over Folarin Balogun. But I think if you go there and watch the tape, Balogun can do the most things. And the U.S. need a striker who has that versatile skill set because they don't involve their strikers in the game enough, right? Ricardo Pepi is not a guy who really creates his own shot. He is someone who is reliant largely on slashing in behind and receiving passes from the midfielder or to linking up, in the box with wide attackers who are creating chances. The U.S. haven't really been a team that is feeding their strikers from midfield or are regularly connecting them to the wingers. That was a problem under Greg Berhalter. It's been a problem under Mauricio Pochettino. Balogun is a guy who can go and find the game a little bit more than Pepe and really than most strikers in the U.S. pool. He's better at that stuff, and he can also create some of his own shots inside the 18, which is a hugely valuable skill set. Like, that's gold dust for this U.S. player pool when they don't have a lot of players who can do that stuff in any position. I think Balogun is really talented, and the most encouraging development for him, really since we talked about him last, because we didn't talk about him a lot last week because he wasn't on the roster. He was apparently just balled up in a mystery box. Is that he's been starting games for Monaco. He started their last 2 games, finally healthy, and he scored a goal over the weekend. So he both started over Beereth 2 weeks ago and started along with Beereth, who's the promising striker we've talked about quite a bit. But he's actually been getting minutes in this Monaco side, and he's been producing in those minutes. That hasn't happened a ton because of all the injuries that he's dealt with, and that's why I'm trying to caution myself with all of this and recognize that Pochettino is probably not going to run him into the ground in 185 minutes across these 2 friendlies. I'm hoping we see 1 start. Right? I don't even know that that's guaranteed for Balogun. But Balogun is good enough that he can change games for the U.S. men's national team against these types of opponents, and that we actually have a chance to see him for the very first time under Pochettino, I think is a huge reason to watch these games.
The other thing at club level, Joe, is that Monaco sold Brel and Bolo on transfer deadline day. So there's competition for minutes out of the way. Ben Seguir as well, who I know is a slightly different position. He's more of an attacking midfielder, but he went to join Bayer Leverkusen as well. So it feels like this has the potential to be a real turning point for Balogun at both club and international level. And I share Joe's enthusiasm. I want to see him properly. I want to have a good look at him in a Pochettino team over these 2 games.
I'm sorry, I might have made this point before, but Breland Bolo is 28. I had him at least 38.
It's crazy because it says he's 28, but it's just a conspiracy. Like, they're 100% lying to us. He's at least 34.
Unreal.
Yeah.
If I might pivot to Josh Sargent, he of 6 goals in 5 games, he of not scoring for the national team for 6 years. If we're going to talk about narrative, we've got a nice little construct for something to happen here, don't we?
Yeah.
Don't we?
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's the story. What you just described is the story that I think multiple USMNT journalists have already written from the ground in Harrison. Like, everybody is thinking about this. Everybody on the ground there wants to talk to Josh Sargent and write about, can he find the ball and can he put it in the back of the net? Which is a real question. We talked about this quite a bit. The March window was the last we've seen of Josh Sargent. And Josh Sargent was really bad in that March window. Lackadaisical defensively, really passive in the attack. His movement was sloppy. He was not impactful. Now, most of Josh Sargent's struggles come from the fact that the U.S. can't find their strikers for reasons I've already detailed. But Sargent has not been in good form with the U.S., and he's been in rip-roaring form with Norwich. So I am very much looking forward to seeing Sargent. We will see Josh Sargent in this window. I'd have to believe that we're going to see real minutes from him. And he is one of the only players that came back from Pochettino's summer ban, right? I mean, no Joe Scally, no Tanner Tespin, no CCV. I mean, that whole middle tier of players didn't come back. Josh Sargent did. So I think that means something for his minutes in this window. I think it means something for his status in the larger player pool. But really, I'm also curious to see how the players around the strikers are going to feed these guys, because if they're not feeding someone like Josh Sargent, I fear his drought will continue for another month.
Okay. I sense we might be talking about your Diego Lunas and such, so why don't we take one more very quick break and we'll dig into that a bit more. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. We missed you. Glad you're back, listener. So, Joe, we were talking about Diego Luna, I believe, or I was at least teeing up Diego Luna before the break. Is this all about Luna this game? I hope it is. I feel like he's got main character syndrome.
He does have some main character energy, Diego Luna. Like, he's just, there's some people that you meet in life that you just gravitate towards, right? I think some people just have that it factor. Diego Luna kind of feels like one of those dudes where he draws you into his circle rather than having to go and find a circle of his own. I really enjoy that about Diego Luna. He is not the character of these games, not least because I think when there is a full strength first choice U.S. group assembled, I am not 100% sure that we see Diego Luna in the lineup, but this is a window that could push Diego Luna into the lineup in a key game at the World Cup, because there's no Malik Tillman. And really, that's the thing. There's no Malik Tillman, there's no Weston McKennie due to injury and due to Pochettino reasons, right? So you have an opportunity, Diego Luna, to be in this team along with Pulisic and Weah and a striker, which if we cast our minds back to March, which was the last time we saw everybody at least available for selection for the U.S., because the Gold Cup had the Club World Cup absences to it. So no Weah, no McKennie in that window, no others as well. March is the only window that Luna has had to be in a full-strength camp because his first call-up was back in January. So we know January camp is not that time. He gets one game in March, doesn't come off the bench in the Panama loss, gets the start against Canada with Pulisic and Weah in that team as well. And now we're back with Pulisic and Weah and Tyler Adams and these other guys in this camp. I think it's a huge opportunity for Diego Luna because my suspicion about Diego Luna is that he is a player that rises to the level of those around him, right? He's a guy who wants to combine, and the quality of his play then is heavily dependent on how good the players around him are at finding him and moving off the ball so that Luna can work some of his tight, close control, quick passing, good vision kind of magic. We saw it in bits and spurts of the Gold Cup, but I didn't think Luna had a really great summer, to be honest with you. I thought he was good in moments. I thought he was really passive and invisible on the ball in other moments. I'm fascinated to see how Luna interacts with Pulisic and Weah, especially in this window. And Serginho Dest, we can toss him into this group as well. I think we're going to see Luna, because if not Luna, then who, sort of in this window. I think Luna's going to get his opportunity, and I am very curious to see how he looks surrounded by better players for a larger amount of time in a game that is not a third-place game that basically means nothing against Canada back in March. So the stage is set for Luna to do something, or at least have the opportunity to do something, and for it to be notable if he does not in September.
So what is the answer to that question? If not Luna, then who?
I mean, you got Zendejas in this roster. You have some other wide attacking options where if it's not Luna on the left, which is sort of where I would expect him to be, you could see a Zendejas. You could also see Pochettino return to the I'm going to play a center mid out wide, where we've seen that with three different players. Yunus Musa, Jack McGlynn, and Seb Berhalter all on that right side. We could see Pulisic more centrally, Weah on the left, and maybe you see a Berhalter or a McGlynn over on that right side. And then you have two pure center mids, Adams and a De La Torre, or Adams and a Zawadzki, or whoever else. I don't think we'll see that. But you could see a double pivot with a center mid out wide right and Luna on the bench. So there are other ways to get to this. And Pochettino could pull out a wild card X-Factor formation change that we don't even know about. All those things are on the table. But I still think the most likely option is that we see Diego Luna get at least one start in this window.
Okay. Counterpoint, 65th minute, we hear the sound of glass break over the speakers at the stadium, and then Gio Reyna just comes out of the tunnel cursing like Stone Cold
There's a
Steve
second
Austin.
mystery box.
Wow.
Suspended
Mystery
above the
box.
stadium like David Blaine.
Exactly.
Wow.
And Poch looks at him and says, "No, there's not. Go home."
Yeah.
I think
Back in you go.
Wow. Glass, just like the hamstrings. Wow. Incredible. Taylor, we have a Serginho Dest. We don't have an Anthony Robinson. What do we think about the fullback contingent for this game?
I don't know. I'm confused about it. Is that the expert analysis you're looking for?
Yeah.
It is a position group that I am perhaps most excited for, because we've talked about this already. Is Dest the right back, and does that mean we're trying other options at left back, or is Dest the left back and we're going with Freeman at right back? My guess is that it will be Arfston left back, Dest right back. But even just that level of experimentation, if it is something else, I think will be fascinating, because it means maybe we're sticking with what we learned from Freeman at the Gold Cup, and now we're trying Dest to see if he can be more attacking on the other side. Or maybe we're sticking with Arfsted, and then we learn about what we learned from him at the Gold Cup. Either way, I think we learn a lot more about who.
But we don't
Poch.
need to call in Weston McKennie, because we already know what Weston can offer. But,
Yeah, controversial food takes and a loose touch, but also
But
a lot
Max
of leadership
Arfsted-
and fun.
Yeah, but Max Arfsted and Alex Freeman, more to learn about them, apparently, after a month in the summer.
I mean, my guess is that they're just Poch guys at this point. That they're guys who work hard, do what he asked of them. I mean, Freeman is a great example of that. We thought he would be in that Gold Cup roster to be a more attack-minded fullback, and instead he stays home. He doesn't look particularly good at it until he starts to be kind of more unleashed as the tournament goes on. But I think he did what was asked of him. He played the role, and he adapted to it, and I think he probably worked pretty hard in training, and I think the same goes for Max Arfston. And I think that, right now, is what Pochettino wants from a lot of these players. I think the frustration, if you listen to some reports, has been that maybe some players weren't coming in with 100% intensity, weren't coming in with 100% focus. Maybe some players felt like, yeah, it's a foregone conclusion, I'm going to be in this team. Maybe some players felt like their checks were coming from their club, so why am I going to kill myself in national team training when I'm probably already going to make the team, or when I know I'm not going to make the team? And so it feels like, at the very least, there are players who have kind of come in and shaken that up and justified their continued selection from a Pochettino standpoint. Whether or not that makes the team better remains to be seen. But I think it does make the fullback position one of the more interesting ones for this camp.
I guess we're going to find out which of his two sons, Alex Freeman and Max Arfston, Poch prefers when Des comes back. I mean, either way, it'll be fun to see Des back in this team, just because he's a fun player. I do feel, this is my own personal opinion, I do feel quite strongly that I want to see him at right back, just so that we can start to see players in positions that they will likely play at the World Cup. And it just gives them more, I mean, this is my thesis statement with these games in general, and basically every game the US will play until the World Cup. I want to see the reps. I want to see the reps between players. I want to see if it's way ahead of him. I want to see, I mean, obviously Dest and Weah played together, but not for a while. I want to see them working on that relationship. Maybe more crucially, if it's going to be Seb Berhalter in midfield, at the Gold Cup he was doing that thing of kind of dropping into the right back area and build out, which is obviously, you know, going to be stepping on Dest's toes. Want to see how he interacts with the midfield as well. So I would prefer to see him on the right side of the defence.
Joe, I wouldn't say that you are fully unflappable, but I think of your three co-hosts, you are the least likely to be flapped. How frustrated would you be if against Korea it is, let's say, Nathan Harriel and Alex Freeman as your two fullbacks?
I'm not sure words can describe.
He's flapping.
Yeah, I'll be about I'll be on some telephone pole somewhere, and I got there via my wings.
Okay, there we go. Okay, wow. So there are combinations that would still make you be like, what are we doing? Okay, cool.
Very much. I mean, that was the Switzerland thing, right? Like, it seemed to me that we had ruled out some players from that, and I was clearly wrong about that, right? And that, I think, is a lot of the frustration from last week's show. I do think, I think, Graham, you said something about the thing that you want to see between now and the World Cup is reps. I want to see the main guys get reps. Like, that is the primary thing I'm looking for. That is not to say that I don't want to see some new players, right? I think we talked about this a little bit last week and maybe on the Patreon. Noah Kai Banks is in this roster. And center back is a spot where I think the position next to Chris Richards is not etched in stone. I think Tim Ream will be on the World Cup roster, absolutely. But I do not think he should be the automatic starter next to Chris Richards. You do have a little bit of time left to test a player that you think has the quality to really impact the USMNT in a big moment. I think Noah Kai Banks is of that quality. Tristan Blackman, another guy that I absolutely would be in favor of him getting a 45-minute stretch in one of these two games against a good team where you're going to learn something about how Tristan Blackman can hang at this level. I don't need to see that from Nathan Harriel. I don't need to see that from Sean Zawadzki. Like, there are guys, I don't need to see that from Damian Downs, to be honest. We've seen it. We know it. We probably could have gleaned that information already from watching the tape. I'm saying that I think Blackman and Banks especially, have the ability to impact the U.S. from what I've seen of them, and therefore I would like to see them in the U.S. roster. There's a real difference there between those players, who I think are just legit good enough to do it at a position of need, and some other players that Poch has brought in to be glue guys, or maybe that he just rates and I don't. But I want to see the main guys get minutes, but I also want to see players who I think can become a main guy really quickly, and by that I do mostly mean Noah Kai Banks, get some minutes. So that's the other thing that I'm watching for in this window is, do we see something different at one of the center back spots in at least one of these games?
So you want consistency, but also something different.
Yeah, but just change when it makes sense to change. And in my view, and again, Pochettino and I see this differently, and that's okay. In my view, I would not change for a Harriel or for some of those other players that I mentioned. I would change for a Banks. Like, if the player's good, get him in the team. If they're not good, then don't bother. That's sort of where I'm at.
That's a good ethos.
I know, right? Crazy.
Very good. Yeah. I suppose that if we want to look at this window and what defines success, I suppose it is crystallizing the squad as we head towards the 2026 World Cup, getting a further idea of what Poch's team looks like, and no injuries, right? I mean, we're not too worried about the result unless it's
No injuries, but then it's not just crystallizing the squad, right? But it's like those players looking good and cohesive and doing things that we haven't seen them do before, like finding the striker and having opportunities to combine and create some chances while still maintaining defensive solidity, having the press look a heck of a lot better than it did back in March. Like, the players need to play good ball, not just so that we know who the players are, right? It needs to be both of those things.
There we go. All right. Well, we look forward to Sports Illustrated Stadium in a few days' time for the first of those games against South Korea. There we are, USMNT Weekly over and out. Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed for your analyses on all this and more.
Thank you very much for your hosting and more, my friend.
Aw, Joe Lowry, pleasure as always. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Graham Ruthven.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
And thank you, listener, the mostest. We'll be back on the feed very shortly. And don't forget, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is the best way to support us for all our bonus goodness, including access to our Discord, lots of USMNT chat in there. But for now, bye!